Good morning, good evening. Welcome to French Quarter Magazine's virtual author talks for a special Zoom meeting on 3 different stories live from Las Vegas. I'm really excited today because we are going to join a very diverse audience from across the United States, from France, and from Montreal, right, Stefan? That is really exciting. And the other really exciting thing is that we have 3 special guest speakers joining us today. All of those stories have something in common. They are based in true stories. So we will discover different characters, men and women, who have played a role in their own, a role in history, or a role in someone's life, and who have been instrumental to the good proceedings of the article that we are going to discuss today, and the 2 books we are featuring all over this next hour. I'm going to start the video on Facebook now also. Hi everybody in Facebook. I'm live from Las Vegas. We are starting our virtual author talks right now. So my name is Isabelle Caramous, founder and publisher of French Quarter Magazine. It's an immense pleasure to be here today, and I'm excited to host this event. That's the 3rd event that I have been hosting. I'm so glad that we are joining, that you are joining us to talk about the fascinating article and a fascinating article and 2 brand new books that I have been looking forward to reading and that I was raving about for weeks. First, we will discover Jonathan Warren's final portrait. Then Clément Horvath's Till Victory, the Second World War, by those who were there. And finally, we will see and talk Joshua Chanin, Sally Brooke Capps on education in North Texas. So it's my pleasure to introduce first to Consul Jonathan Warren, who I greatly respect and have known for over 8 years, I think, and with whom I have discovered pieces of unknown history of the great Las Vegas. Jonathan has a lot of great stories in store for you, not only today, but on a daily basis. When you visit the Liberace Foundation website or his own website, which is Jonathan Warren me, M-E. Let me see if I can share his website for you. And in the website, you can actually see do you see Jonathan Warren's website?
Yes, I see it.
Okay, so it's Jonathan Warren .me. It's M-E at the end. And so Jonathan he has much chords on his arc because he has a different role position in his life. So we are going to see here the writing page where Jonathan offered different writing on Las Vegas history. And so if you want to take the time to look at the website, that's very interesting. And I have been always curious about what Las Vegas history can bring to his resident. I live here in Las Vegas since 13 years now, and it's just amazing how much Las Vegas hold as history. So anyway, the website is currently available, and Jonathan currently holds the position of chairman. So when I was saying about the Liberace Foundation website, you can also go to www.liberacefoundation.com. The foundation offers every day some Las Vegas theme history tours, as well as a number of tours on the iconic American pianist, the showmanship Liberace. A little bit about Jonathan right now is that Jonathan is one of our local leading honorary consul and has resided in Las Vegas for over 50 years. Right, Jonathan?
Yes, that's right. 50 years. And it's 10 years ago that I met you. So
yes.
I know, but
Yes. It seems like it was yesterday. So Jonathan has co-founded the Consular Chamber, was founding president of the Nevada Committee on Foreign Relations, which became the World Affairs Council. He was also the founding president of the Académie Francophone, which became Alliance Française Las Vegas. He was appointed the second consul of the Principality of Monaco in Las Vegas by the Prince Albert II in 2010 to represent the Principality in Nevada, Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming. So he's the author of a three-part article called The Final Portrait, a fascinating story about the mystery of a woman portrait painting and the story tied to it. And I was fascinating, and once you start reading the story, you don't want to stop reading it. Jonathan is going to discuss and enlighten us on the discovery of another unknown story of Las Vegas, and helps bring the first-hand account of the Church of the Artist and his discovery of who he was, and his first-hand account being heirs to Count Diero's papers. Those accounts will be brought to light to us today. So, of course, we welcome your question for each of our speakers today. We may ask you a question at the end of the author speech, or you can type your question directly into the chat. We will get to as many as time allows. And now, Jonathan, I will turn it over to you. Thank you, Jonathan, for being here today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I hope some of you might have had a chance to read The Final Portrait. It came about, because of a friend of mine who knew Howard Hughes and shed a lot of light on the topic. And so Bernadette, I understand you gave tours in Las Vegas, and with regard to Hughes, I grew up in Las Vegas, and when Hughes died, I was delivering newspapers in Good Springs, Nevada. I remember the headlines every day, and I remember the court case going on. Most of the books about Hughes were published right at that time, right? In fact, either in 1970 when he left Las Vegas, or in 1975 when he died, or 76 when he died. Those just about everything came out then. And if you, the funny thing is, in retrospect, if you read some of them now, you'll find where some of them didn't read, some of those authors didn't read the other authors' books, and had they done so, they would have found the answers to a lot of their own questions. So it's he's a fascinating story, but in this case, I happen to have discovered where he was tied together with various other stories by an artist who painted a woman with whom Hughes was infatuated. In fact, he painted all of the women with whom Hughes was infatuated.
So
But the last one,
before we go into the mystery of the woman painting, a portrait painting, well, you have been here 50 years you have 50 years of living experience in Las Vegas. Your academic and parents' influence on the field of history might have also determined your choice on some of the stories you write about. You are going to touch on. We are going to touch on a lot of history today, and what put you on this project of writing, and what was the driving force on this article? All started with an holographic wheel, actually, and can you tell our viewer what is this document? Is it valid in the state of Las Vegas?
well, what you're referring to is the Hughes case itself, which was tried back in the 1970s. The Hughes will, there was, of course, a will. Howard Hughes died without a will, allegedly, and then a will allegedly showed up all of a sudden in the Mormon temple in southern Utah, or in Utah, and was immediately challenged by the Hughes estate and the Lummis family in particular, and in district court in southern Nevada, which was an easy thing for the Hughes estate to overrun the minor league players who were claiming the will. The will was a holographic will, which is to say it was handwritten and signed and not witnessed. In Nevada, holographic wills are not only legal, they're almost the norm. You don't have to have a witness, you don't have to have it notarized if it is handwritten and signed. And it was a holographic will. Hughes had alluded to the fact that he had a holographic will. So that was another reason why it had so much traction in court at the time.
So where was that holographic wheel found, and what was at stake overall?
Well, he died worth about $1 billion, maybe a little more. He was probably the richest man in America, or very, very close to it at the time. Without a will, he had no direct heirs. He had distant family, cousins, and so forth in Texas, and they would inherit the assets, which were primarily companies and real estate around the country, but especially in Las Vegas, where he had 5 casinos and about 25,000 acres of land that we now call Summerlin. And so they were set to inherit that, and this will popped up in the Mormon temple, and the Mormon temple delivered it to the district court in Nevada. And so then it was an open case. The will, the difference between the will and the otherwise, the inheritance otherwise, was 3 beneficiaries. One of them was the Boy Scouts of America. One of them was the Mormon Church itself, and another one was a guy named Melvin Dumar. And Dumar alleged that it later came to light that Dumar was the one who had provided the will to the temple. And Dumar said some mysterious emissary had dropped it off at his gas station in Gabbs, Nevada, in northern Nevada. And he was terrified of it. So he gave it to the people he saw as the ultimate authority. As Dumar was a Mormon from northern Nevada. So the three parties that it would have granted 1/16 to roughly each, which is about $157 million each, were the Boy Scouts of America, the Mormon Church, and Melvin Dumar. The question then came up: why would Hughes give Melvin Dumar $157 million? And Dumar, of course, told the famous story of his having picked up Hughes in rural Nevada in the middle of the night, face down in the desert in the middle of nowhere as he drove through central or northern Nevada, and delivered him to Las Vegas. And apparently that was the impetus for why Hughes would have given him this money. A 2.5-hour drive with Hughes and having picked him up basically hypothermic in a December night in 1967 in the Nevada desert. So that was the claim. And of course, there's been a movie about part of that called Melvin and Howard, which basically makes a joke of Melvin, which a lot of people did. Melvin was not the brightest bulb in the chandelier, and he was made the butt of many a joke in those days. It was easy for the other side to do that, which was a very sophisticated group of business people.
So we learn that the Mormon Melvin Dumar, who was named in a part of the will, would give all of his evidence to the former FBI agent Gary Magnuson. And he actually wrote his first book, The Investigation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the Magnuson comes into the story because Magnuson is the organized crime specialist at the FBI in Las Vegas for many years. He's a very well-known guy here, big time FBI agent, and he retired and he moved to Utah where his brother lived. And he found working for his brother was Melvin Dumar. And he had a conversation with him that was basically saying, yeah, I know who you are. You're that clown who tried to pull over that fake will during the Howard Hughes trial. And Dumar threw down a challenge and said, well, you're supposed to be this badass FBI agent. Then you go investigate yourself. I'll give you all the evidence I couldn't get into court. And you go look at it and you find out whatever you find out and you publish what you find out. You have the rights to it. You can publish it. I don't want a dime. But if you find out I'm right, you publish that. And so Magnuson took him up on it, expecting to further expose what a clown Dumar was, and wound up doing the opposite over the course of several years. And it's actually a pretty sad story. He winds up standing out in the middle of the desert and realizing that Dumar was right all along.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what happened when Magnuson did his research is that he believed and was convinced that Dumar was telling the truth all along.
Yeah, all he was able to do was corroborate. It was quite a trek for Magnuson. He was kind of a plodding investigator type, and so I came into the picture when there was a story with regard to Hughes. It turned out that after Magnuson started writing his book, it made the press, and then Howard Hughes's airport manager, Count Darrow in Las Vegas, piped up and said, well, of course, the argument was that he had never left the Desert Inn Hotel the entire time he lived there for 3 years. And so Dumar piped up and said, yes, he did. I flew him. And one night I lost him. And that night was in December of 1967 when he had flown him to the Cottontail Ranch brothel. And Howard had left late at night while Dumar was asleep, and he had lost him that night. So there's a connection that comes to light then And the tie-in is this prostitute who works at the brothel, who Darrow is able to describe. And he describes her in a newspaper article here, which caught the attention of a friend of mine who had a neighbor who met that description. Very unique situation. This was a woman with a diamond in her upper incisor back in the 60s, which was very rare then. And so Magnuson, actually, I got in touch with Darrow and with Magnuson, and Magnuson and I went looking for this woman, found the trail of this the woman that had been the neighbor of the friend of mine, but it was not. It was turned out not to be the woman who was tied to the story. She was similar but not the same, and Magnuson was able to eliminate her by careful investigation. But it got me involved in the that's what got me involved in the story. And we later, almost entirely by accident, realized that the woman in question had been painted by Hughes's own artist, he had contracted to paint her along with every other woman who had starred in his movies.
So coming back to Count Robert Darrow, this man was work for WWII. In the article, all is well detailed about Darrow's background and his career as a pilot to WWII. What key element Darrow could have brought to Magnuson's book?
Well, he did. In the end, Darrow was a late discovery of Magnuson. Magnuson wound up writing two books. One was The Investigation, and the second one is called Stolen Justice. And in the investigation, towards the end of it, is when he discovers Count Darrow. And Darrow had flown Hughes. Not only was Darrow hired by Hughes Tool Company to run the airport that Hughes had bought in Las Vegas, but he also was the one who flew approaches to Hughes's proposed sites for the supersonic transport airport at the time. So he was a real expert on what Hughes was doing at the time and was known as such. And when he piped up, what he had known all along was that that Hughes had left the Desert Inn because Darrow had flown him at least 4 times to different locations. Just on he actually flew him 4 times to brothels. He flew him several more times in approaches to proposed sites for his SST, including Mormon Mesa and Jean Dry Lake. And so he was an expert pilot on this sort of thing. He's known as such for many years. And that's that. So he had that been more a part of the record during the trial, had that been evidence that could have been brought in, it would have made a huge impact. But probably even more so, the impact would have been more from the painting, the evidence of the painting.
Mm-hmm. So the Count had reported flying Hughes to the Cottontail Ranch regularly to see that we call her Sunny, the Hollywood beauty. Sunny was her portrait made by a real talent, a good artistic quality, and we will see later on what happened to that painting. But that painting will become instrumental on the proceedings of the story, and so much had come down to this unknown woman. Not going to give away too many spoilers, but can you tell us how instrumental the painting became?
Well, it became everything. The key part of the story being that Darrow flew Hughes to 2 different brothels, one being Ash Meadows, which was then called the Annex, and the other being the Cottontail Ranch when it opened in 1967. And he flew Hughes both times to meet the same, or in all 4 times to meet the same woman, who called herself Sunny. and was obviously known to him before then. And I should say was apparently known to him before then. Darrow had been somebody who flew what was called the Midnight Special. He used to fly clients to the bordellos up to these are legal brothels in central Nevada, and he would fly clients to them on a regular basis, on a charter basis, usually 3 or 4 at a time. So he was known to these brothels, and he was a known provider who would bring in customers. And he began to bring in Hughes in 1967. And the last time he did was in December of 1967. He flew Hughes to the Cottontail Ranch to see Sonny again. And Hughes stayed very late, and Darrow fell asleep in the kitchen, which was his normal routine. And when he woke up, Hughes was gone. He never saw him again. He thought he was going to be fired from Hughes' organization, but he wasn't. Hughes had made it back to Las Vegas. He did not know how, and he never heard another word about it. It was, Hughes was a mysterious guy. Darrow knew him and met him, but it was never a friendly relationship. It was always completely business, and it was always completely flying approaches to airports, or in the dead of night, these flights to Central Nevada brothels. So Sonny was the woman he was meeting. There was a painting of Sonny that was hanging on the wall at the Cottontail Ranch. That painting ultimately, many years later, after the Cottontail Ranch had closed down, and then after its original owners had passed away, it ended up with Darrow, actually. And only at that point did we realize that the artist name, we had the wrong artist name for the painting. It looks different on a photo than it does in person. And
Yes. So could you describe how captivating, that's the word that you use, how captivating was the painting? What did Darrow say that makes you ponder if he was being mysterious? Was the reader what
well,
what the reader don't know is that she held the keys to a mystery
right.
spanning five decades.
Right. Well, Magnuson had attempted to find the artist, but the artist appeared to be Henry Schein, appeared to be the name, Shein. And so he searched very hard to find this artist. Now, he had sent, we had only a photo of the painting at that time from the widower of the Madam of the Bordello. And he showed us, he showed Darrow and me the photograph, and he published it in his book. And you can see that it's a skillful painting. It's not some amateur work. And the signature appears to be Henry Schein. But when Darrow obtained the painting, he inherited it years later. We realized looking at it that the signature on it wasn't Henry Schein, it was Henri Saban. And Henri Saban was the Hollywood artist that Hughes had used to hire to paint all of his starlets, especially those with whom he was infatuated, for whom he would generally contract Saban to paint them in oil on canvas instead of his normal pastels. So this was an oil on canvas. Saban starts painting in the late 1920s. He's a very, very well-known Hollywood artist in magazines and whatnot, all the way through the 1940s and even into the 50s. His last known oil on canvas was Brigitte Bardot in 1963. But Sonny from the Cottontail Ranch, this completely unknown woman in an obscure brothel in central Nevada, was painted by Henri Saban in 1968. So she does tie together, of course, the story of that would have, of course, could potentially have changed the entire
Yes, it could. I mean,
track of this.
if she could be found, if she could be found, she could confirm the Howard Hughes story tied to Dumas, and
Yes.
that revelation could have had a potential impact on the court course.
Yeah, of
A
course.
court case.
Of course. And the actual woman, Magnuson did find she has passed away. So the impact of the case, of course, is far too many years gone. The impact on the case, the potential of the impact on the case that this painting would have. More to the point of interest to us at the time, Count Darrow was interested. He was given the rights to the name Cottontail Ranch by its new owner, and also all of the artifacts, which is how he came into possession of the painting. And he was interested in doing something with the name. And I had suggested to him that we make it a lingerie brand. And I see that Felix is on here, and I think he and I talked about that. So we had talked about this, and we were talking about the logo being Sunny, the painting of Sunny. And the legals of that being the fact that the artist's estate would own the rights to reproduce that image. So who do we contact? And the only record of where that painting comes from, of course, is the signature, and of who it is. The only record of that is the bordello owners themselves, who told that to a British journalist, and also to there was a Magnuson found another bordello girl who had worked with Sonny in another house, who said that Sonny bragged about having Hughes as a client, and that he was so infatuated with her he had a painting done of her that hung in another house. So that's the only record of it, is that it was actually work for hire by Hughes, which, because of work for hire law, would make the image reproduction owned by the Hughes estate, except that if they were ever to claim it, they would disavow their own estate. So there's probably no risk of them claiming it. So it makes for an interesting conundrum, this painting. And of course, as you see in the article, since then, Count Darrow passed away and left the painting to me. It hangs in the consulate of Monaco.
Yeah, it's an amazing, fascinating story, and a true story, untold in Las Vegas history. And thank you, Jonathan. It was really fascinating, and really, it was just for me. It was just a pleasure to read your article, so well written, and with a lot of details. But everything we need to know, we just found it in your article in few pages, you know.
Right. Well, thank you. I hope everybody enjoys it.
Yeah, so I really recommend everybody who's here today, or our viewers, to go to Jonathan Warren .me.
A couple of questions have popped up on the screen. One of them is, was Howard Mormon? The answer is no. But he, like a lot of Las Vegans, saw the value in the cohesion of Mormons when they worked together. He hired them extensively. And Howard Eckersley, who was his big manager at Hughes Tool in those days, was Mormon, and so was the crowd that took care of nurses that took care of Hughes when he lived at the Desert Inn Hotel. The other question is, have I read Cadillac Desert? I haven't. I've heard about it. That's one I need to read. There are a lot of books on Hughes that spin a lot of yarns. It's really interesting. Most of them, though, are quite old. And when you put them together, as I said, it makes for, it's quite enlightening now.
Thank you. Is there any question among our attendees? Let us know any other question you have for Jonathan. You can speak up. Unmute yourself if you need to, or just write your question on the chat if you like. I think I see another question.
That's a comment from Peter Studebaker, I see there.
Okay.
Who knew the Lummis family very well and was very involved with the Hughes estate. There are a lot of people still in Las Vegas who were, or not a lot, but several. Peter Studebaker among them. Also, the immediate past director of the Neon Museum, a good friend of mine, was the reporter who covered the trial for Channel 3 in Las Vegas. We had a great conversation about it the other day. So there's a lot of people who will remember bits and pieces of this, and it's a lot of fun when you kind of go back now and look at all of these pieces and put them together, and it's pretty obvious what happened.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, and it was a pleasure. And again, to remind you, you can find more story about Las Vegas history on his website. And we are going now to talk to Clément Horvath. Is our second speaker today. He lives in Paris and hosts a podcast in English in which he interviews World War II veterans. And welcome, Clément.
Hello, thank you for having me.
How are you?
Fine, thanks.
So you have a website, www.tillvictory.com, and it's my pleasure to welcome you and introduce to you all our attendees this young writer. He has collected thousands of letters from American, British, Canadian, and French soldiers from the Second World War and published this moving and new wartime accounts in his first book called Till. Yes, thank you for showing us the book, Till Victory, the Second World War by Those Who Were There, which was an award-winning success in France in 2020. So his book covers the whole war in Western Europe from 1939 to 1945 through the unpublished letters and diaries of more than 50 soldiers from all allied nations, and honors men and women who never had a chance to tell their stories. So he received the History 2019 award from the hands of Princess Caroline of Monaco and the First Lady Brigitte Macron. Clément, I know you don't claim yourself as a historian, but you insist that you are not a professional historian. You're simply a history enthusiast and grateful for the soldiers that free us. And this is your way of saying thank you. But, you know, after the success of your first book, you decided to write a second book, and that the one I was starting to read again, this one, it's another volume called Till Victory, Letters toujours J à la victoire. This one is not in English yet. The first volume that I was talking about is available in English. You can find it on Amazon and any other website if you Google it. So in which you reveal unpublished new letters on the Second World War, focusing the time. The second one is between the years 1944 and 1945, if I recall. We will discuss the fascinating story of the encounter of a French girl, also a French little girl and her family in Normandy, and a British paratrooper. Before, of course, we will talk about the numerous collection of letters that you have accumulated during 15 years of research. So Clément is going to discuss and share with us today a few selected untold stories of soldiers and help bring these first-hand accounts to light. Welcome, Clément, and thank you for participating to our event today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, because it's pretty hard these days to talk about a new release, because I'm sure the other authors here know about the struggle we are facing these days with the media only talking about COVID. So yeah, it's pretty tough releasing a new book these days, and
that's why we are doing
yeah,
those virtual event, and it's for our attendees. It's also a way to get to know new books, because we are trying to reinvent ourselves, and authors are still taking the time to write in 2020 or before. So coming back to your book, as I read your book, your first and second volumes, I was thoroughly impressed. And one of the things that I saw in opening your books is the fact that those books are very different from many others I read on the subject of World War II. You know how sometimes you see the academic approach or the practical approach in history books. I graduate and I have a BA in history, so I see a little bit the way it's structured and the way you approach to write those books. But here you really have a braided approach of scholarship practice by relating historical facts, and at the same time you also make it entertaining with photography, full content of the soldier's letter. You really spend time. You have to spend time to collect those letters and items and personal artifacts that belongs to soldiers. So you make your work more human in a way by giving a voice to those many soldiers through their letters. So we can't imagine how, also the investigation have been complicated sometimes for you. You had to read all the handwritten documents, research the history of each soldier, dig into history archive, finding the soldiers' descendants, etc. Can you tell us more about your work? How did you work? How did you do your research?
It all started 18 years ago now. I was 15 years old, and I was always very interested in history. I didn't know I was going to write a book then, but I was just collecting stuff on flea markets, eBay, and it started with helmets, uniforms, and then I moved to papers and letters from World War II soldiers, and I discovered so many interesting stories that after a while, after about 10 years, I decided to do something with that. So I decided to write this book. So I'll show it again because apparently it didn't show up. So a pretty thick book. Now it's 376 pages long now. And the problem was that, of course, I could do my research in the archives through internet. That was the easy part, actually. The hardest part was to find the descendants of the soldiers, because you just can't publish letters like that. You have to make sure that the family is okay with it. So I had to track down their relatives all over the world, all the way to New Zealand, in America, of course, Canada, and yeah, all around the world. And I found more than 70 different families now. So that was a huge part of the work, to actually find the descendants or the veterans themselves. But it was very interesting adventure, and I'm glad that the book is now out in English, because that was the goal all along. It was released in France 2 years ago, and like you said, it had an award. So it's fantastic, because it's 15 years of my life that I put into that,
It's
and
a great reward, after
yeah.
15 years of research, and you are pretty young you have started this as a collector of letters first, and then that brings you this beautiful book, very very detailed and deep in research, and we can open also the book, and we see a lot of pictures, lot of items that you also some of your collections that you have photography here and share with the readers. So it's a very interesting book, and it has also a lot of letters from the soldiers. So my question is, how can we understand what? I was asking myself, how can we understand what our liberators have gone through to realize the importance of their heritage? For you, the answer is their letters.
Yeah,
And
because
yes.
well, it's like I said, I started collecting with helmets and everything. The problem is that those artifacts, they are very interesting and very they have a huge historical importance, but they don't talk. And a letter does talk. And when you read their words that were written 77 years ago now, or more, you travel through time. And well, actually, it's not that easy, because there was censorship at the time. They were not supposed to tell what they were going through, but fortunately, a lot of them actually did talk about what they went through, and in great detail, because the censors just they went through a whole. They were basically officers, company officers, and they had a whole day of fighting. Behind them, so they had that pile of letter in the tent, and they just went through it like this,
Yes. So
so
we see that censorship in the correspondence of soldiers exists.
yeah, but
Soldiers should
sometimes it
not
was very light. Yeah,
they should not worry their families. We ask them not to make no known where they are, their location. But there were also many incredible testimonies that escape sometimes censorship, and then it's a good thing for us, because in a way we are able to read those letters and what they tell us. It's
yes, and the fascinating thing about it is that they were actually written in the foxholes. They were written on the battlefields while it was all happening. So this is really in a sense, it's I think even more important than testimonies that we can have today of veterans, because with time they can forget things. They can also change their story a little bit. Those letters were not supposed to be shared with everyone. So they actually told what they went through. They shared their feelings with their mothers, their wives. So we have very moving testimonies from the time. So it's very different from accounts from today of old veterans remembering events that took place 77 years ago. It's a completely different way of looking at history.
Also, it exists the American V-mail, Victory email, and the British aircraft. Tell us the difference between those two.
There are not a lot of difference. They were actually a system that was devised by the British in the first place to actually photograph the letters that were written on some forms and then ship them on microfilms overseas, so that it was more secure and also faster. It was supposed to be faster, and the Americans and then it was printed overseas and then sent to the address it was supposed to go to. And the Americans did a similar system that was called V-mail a bit later on, and yeah, and billions of emails were shared during the war. It's a clever way of sending letters. Yeah.
Letters, yes. And the first family found was a soldier named Ray Alm, an elite American soldier from the 2nd Ranger Battalion, who landed on Omaha Beach.
Yes, on D-Day, yeah.
And so you were able to found his son. His
Yes,
name is, yeah,
that
and he was able to share with you some of the a good anecdote that his father. Can you tell us a little bit about this anecdote and story?
Yeah, so it all started the same way. I found a letter on eBay and spent way too much for it, and and then I researched the story and the soldier, and then I had to find the family, and I managed to find his son. That was the first family I found for the book, because it was sometime in 2013 or 14 that I decided that it was going to be a book. So and I found his son. Unfortunately, he passed away since then, but he told me so many stories about his father, who was true war hero. Like, the guy landed on Omaha Beach on D-Day. It's the same unit you see on Saving Private Ryan. So you can have, you can imagine how tough it was on that day. And and he went through the whole war unscathed, like completely okay. It just broke his leg playing baseball while waiting for the ship to get him home, just right before the end of the war. But he went through terrible battles and wasn't wounded or anything. And he was one of the very, very few from his unit to actually make it home. And but the thing is that at some point he wasn't allowed to tell, because he was in very elite unit. He wasn't supposed to tell where he was or where he was going, and he had this signature, this coded signature system with his wife. And until victory,
yeah, I find it's fascinating when I read that, and yes, you can.
And until victory is actually a coded signature that Ray had, which meant that he was on his way to Germany, and he had so many other different codes for all those countries because he didn't know
right?
at the
Because
time what it was going to
censorship
be.
censorship exists again, and so Ray could not reveal his location. So he
Yeah,
used to
but he actually did, because he devised that whole
by
system.
signature, right? By the sign.
Yeah,
When we
yeah,
talk about signature, it's a clever way to close his letters with, for example, when he said "with love," he meant he was in England. All my love is in Scotland. And when he writes the end of his letter lovingly, well, that means he's in France. So he was giving some clue
yes.
where,
But actually, and for, like, for most soldiers, he devised that whole system before D-Day. But as soon as he landed, he went through so many experiences and terrible tragedies that he had to share everything, and he didn't care about all that afterwards. He was telling everything about D-Day. He wrote about his friends being killed, what it feels like to be shelled. He actually reveals everything in detail. So he had that whole system of coded signatures, but he actually didn't really use it. I found a few letters where he wrote "till victory," but most of the time he just said things, shared his experiences, and his letters are very, very interesting. Um, hmm.
now the letter represents the soldier's last link with the real world. The loved one, the home, the possibility of escaping, also the nightmare of the war. Um, uh, you have collected these rare letters for 15 years.
Yeah.
The first volume has occupied half of your life. What triggered the desire in you to collect pieces of history like items and uniforms and those letters? What triggers the desire in you?
Just, I mean, it started very early on. When I was a kid, my father took me to the Normandy beaches and the cemeteries of Colville, and with all the white crosses, all the way to the horizon, and it really moved me. And I think that I wanted to connect with these soldiers, and say thank you. So that whole work that I did for all those years before I even wanted to make a book out of it, was more about just getting to know them and what they went through and what it was like, because at some point during my work I was the exact age that those guys were at the time. And I live a comfortable life, and those guys didn't. Some of them didn't have a future, because some of the letters in the book are the last ones they ever wrote. So yeah, to me it was very important to do something to honor them, and make their stories known, because those guys were my age and they never had a future, and they deserved that homage. And
You met Thomas Friedrich. I'm sorry. That was assigned to the 56th Coast Artillery Regiment near
no,
San Francisco, right?
I haven't met him, but I'm in touch with his son.
Okay. You were
Yeah.
not able to meet him.
No, there are very few soldiers from the book that I actually met, because if those letters were on eBay, it usually means that they passed away. So I had to I found their descendants or relatives, but very few soldiers are still alive. I think that from in the two books combined, there are only 5 soldiers still alive today, and they are in their 90s, hundreds. So we're very I was very privileged to meet them, but I wish I could have met them all. But yeah, Thomas' story, it's very interesting because he was in San Francisco right before Pearl Harbor, and at the time the U.S. Army was very, very small and very they lacked equipment and everything, and it's fascinating because in his letters the censorship was not even uh, in place at that time. So he described everything about, he didn't have anything to sleep on, he didn't have a gun, he didn't have anything. And when you think about what the US Army became 5 years later, it's just incredible. The U.S. Army was smaller than the Romanian army in 1941. So it's very interesting to read those accounts from the time. It's
Yeah, because we really we can experience through those letters, we can experience what they went through, their emotion, their fear, their hope also. And they were not their bag that they were carrying, were pretty heavy too, so when some of them landed in the Normandy beach, some did not even survive because it was also landing underwater, and it was many left their life on the beach.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now, um, what soldiers that for you has moved you the most?
Uh,
Do you remember what maybe one soldier that you would like to?
it, it's
Um,
it's always a very difficult question because, like I said, there are more than 50 soldiers in the book, and I have a special connection with each one of them. But I- I'd say that the ones that moved me the most were, of course, those who gave their lives, and there are quite a few in the book, and one of them was Melvin Roth, who was killed in Germany, and I actually have his Valentine card that was sent by his wife. It was just recently wed, and she sent him this Valentine's Day card, and it was killed in between, and the card was sent back, returned to sender, with the mention deceased on it. So this is a simple piece of paper, but it means so much, and when you see a photo of the man, it's very sad because he had a whole future in front of him. He actually wanted to become a doctor. He started studies for that, but he wanted to become an officer, specializing in medical department, but he was moved to the infantry because they needed some men in Germany, because they lost so many men in previous months. So and he only made it a few weeks before he was killed during the Ruhr crossing. So that was very moving story, and then you have.
Was it the soldiers that his mother continued to write to other soldiers?
It's not a mother. It's a
The aunt?
young
Uh,
girl from Holland.
okay.
It's a young girl from Holland that took care of his grave. It's something that people in Holland still do today. They take care of the graves of the American, British, Canadian soldiers that fought for them, and this young girl was writing to his family after he was killed, and that's actually Melvin's family sent me those letters because I have Melvin's letters His wife's letters, but his family sent me the letters that the girl from Holland sent them at the time, and it's very interesting because she speaks very broken English, but you can feel in her words all the that she's really grateful, and how tough life is for them in Holland. It took a while before they were actually liberated. So um, those are, parts of Europe that we don't talk a lot about. We us French people, we tend to focus mainly on Normandy, and sometimes it even feels like war started on Homa Beach and ended with the liberation of Paris, but it's not at all like this, and I really wanted to talk about the whole thing from 1939 to 1945 and cover a lot of ground as well.
Yeah, it's really broad, and when I look at your book, I go through all the pages, and almost uh, each you mention soldiers and their nationality, their location, where they come from. Then we have pictures of models. Did you take models for the soldiers to wear the
Yeah,
uniform?
well, it's basically like in a museum, I wanted to show original uniforms. It's all originals. There are no copies in it. Um,
How
uh,
did you find those
but
uniforms? They almost look like brand new.
there are no, they are not. They're all very.
Right. They
Like,
look
you
so.
can ask any of the guys who wore them. They are very smelly and old.
Oh, okay. Well,
But
it doesn't show on the pictures.
yeah. But no, they are all originals from the war, and it's just that I didn't want to put them on a plastic mannequin. I wanted, the whole book is supposed to be moving, and it's like I want the reader to travel through time.
Can sense the item they use, the
Yeah,
the the uniform, the everything. You can sense it.
yeah,
It's
and to achieve
closer
that
to us.
effect, to achieve that effect with the uniforms and everything that I wanted to show in the book that are linked to stories of soldiers, of course. I had some friends wear them, and I casted them because they looked like the guy they were supposed to um, like to play, uh, so yeah, it's I think it's a more human, like you can
You
relate to the soldier more that way.
Something that also, when I read, it's on your second book, but about this story about the encounter of uh, a, a young little girl that found her savior, um, Daniel, with Daniel the soldier.
Mhm.
I forgot his last name.
Daniel
Daniel
Lyons.
Lines.
Yeah.
Okay, and after 75 years, they found each other. The little girls that was 5 years old in Normandy, a family, the Roberts family. Um, this house was the first house free by the Americans.
Well, no, yeah, it's
I mean, the British Americans. We don't. I guess I don't know both.
yeah. Well, the story is it's actually a very different thing from my usual work, because I met Natalie, who is here with us today, a few years ago. Because of that, because I actually met that veteran Daniel Lyons from the 6th Airborne Division, who is a British veteran in Normandy, and we talked a little bit, and And after I put his picture online from my trip to Normandy, I was contacted by Natalie, who told me that her mother was 5 year old during D-Day, and she met this veteran at the time. He liberated her house. Nobody knows if it was the first house liberated. It was actually most likely the first house liberated in Ranville, which is close to Caen. um, but all the events around that time are very it's the fog of war. It's kind of hard to make sure of that, but yeah, it's a very, very moving story, because she was a very little girl, and she remembers that young soldier with a blackened face, because it was during the night of June 5th to June 6th, shortly after midnight. And he gave her some chocolate, to a little girl, a little French girl, and they met again, actually 73 years later, I think. And then I was lucky enough. Natalie invited me to share a meal with her mother, Therese, and Daniel, on the 75th anniversary of D-Day, in Ranville, where it happened. So that was very, very moving, and it's a story I shared in the second book, which is not again available in English yet, but I haven't even
Not
discussed
yet.
it with my publisher yet. So,
Yes, yeah.
but
We wait. We wait. It will be. It will be translated in
yes,
English soon. But
me too.
the first volume has really has a lot to tell about the soldiers and their letters, and how they feel emotionally, their fear, their hope, and the tie they had with their family, with those correspondents. Um, Coming back to the to now to the story of Daniel Lyon, I think
Yes,
Lyon.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. In, if I recall, he landed in a field not far from the house of Robert's family. Um, he, he, so 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 why for you was that story so important in the second book?
Well, it's one of 40 news stories, and like I said, it's quite different because the process was completely different. I met the veteran first, then the family, and then Natalie shared some letters that Daniel sent her. So it's complete opposite of my usual process of finding the letters
Yeah.
and the family and everything. But it's a different story because I made a short film about it, called Red Beret and Dark Chocolate, that you can find on YouTube.
And it's in English as well, right? French
Yeah,
and
yeah,
English.
there are English subtitles,
Yes.
so everybody can enjoy it, and it's yeah, it's just a small documentary I put together to honor the memory of Daniel, who actually passed away last year. Um, so yeah, I wanted to well, no, not last year. We're already in
It's
2021.
time,
A bit
2020
more than a year ago.
very fast, so we are
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
losing track of time.
So yeah, this is a short documentary I made with the interview I made of Therese, and Natalie is in it as well, and it tells the story of Daniel and how they met on that night, and their reunion so many years later. So yeah, it's a nice story. It's a very nice story, and Therese is very touching. Very moving. It's great to hear her, talk about her memories of that night. So yeah, I'm very grateful for Natalie and Taz to share this story with me and all of us.
So we have comments on the chat, and very very. You can read. They are addressed to you, Clément.
Mhm.
It's a long two comments. Thank you for making those comments, and how much we appreciate the work you have done, and the time you have spent to do all the research. It's a tremendous work, and your award is well deserved.
Thank you very much.
So, so anyway, this is your book in English. That where can we find it again? On
You can find it on Amazon. You also have links on the website. You go to tealvictory.com. And yeah.
Okay, and then of course you have the podcast that
Oh yeah.
we can listen.
Yeah,
And
that's another project. It's linked to Teal Victory. It's a podcast where I interview World War II veterans and other historians. It's called Teal Victory, a podcast about World War II and peace, and it's available on all streaming platforms, Spotify and everything. And yeah, it's interviews, conversations I had with some of the veterans that are in the book, or their families, and it's all about the importance of remembering what they did, and so that we can appreciate our peace, and freedom. That
yes, we
we
can't forget
can take
that,
for granted.
and right now, our life is it's it's easy to to say, well, we are free, but at that time, it was men like those heroes that
And the thing is that it can still happen again. So it's very important to
not to forget.
remember.
Yeah, not to forget. Well, thank you. It was really thank you so much for this great great interview.
Well, thank you very
Uh,
much for having me.
yes, yes. So, if our attendees have more questions, we are ready to take some questions on the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself. Again, we have a wonderful presentation. Yes, we like your presentation a lot. Now, any other question? Uh, any other question for Clément? um, Anything you want to add, Clément, to our readers and viewers?
Well, I hope you enjoyed the book. If you're interested in it, it's a labor of love that took me half my life. So it's yeah, like I said, it's pretty tough because I didn't expect it to be released in the midst of pandemic. So it's pretty hard to let people know about it. But
So right now, the bookstores are still closed in France.
yeah, it's the same thing. I was so unlucky with the second volume in France because it was actually released the exact day before all the bookstores closed down. So it was, yeah, talk about bad luck. But yeah, I mean, the families are very happy about it, and I feel like I did my duty, to preserve those stories for many others to read and remember them. So I'm really happy about it. So.
And you know, the now we are all online and going through the Zoom, and so there is a possibility for also you to spread the word about your books, and that's what we are trying to do today, and
Yes.
and to have other media, if is there any other media around us who listen to this video, which will be shared. The recording will be shared on our social media and Facebook, and so good luck with your book, Clément.
Thank you very
And
much.
right now we are going to talk about a different book from our third author and contributor writer of French Quarter magazine. Thank you so much, Clément. Let's give the microphone to Joshua Chanin. Chanin? Chanin or Chanin? Hello?
Chanin. Chanin. I am not French, no. Well, hey.
Welcome to our virtual event, and I'm going to briefly talk about, you, Joshua, that I know for a few years now, and you are a lecturer of history and housing director at Texas A&M University Commerce. You did your research interest. Your research interests include the history of Texas, education, women, and gender in the American South during the Progressive Era. Your book is all about this period of the Progressive Era. You are a frequent contributor for French Quarter magazine, and really we appreciate so much of your contribution and writings and articles that our readers also enjoy much about history. So your interests also include early American history, politics, and the military. You are the author of Sally Brooke Capps. We're going to see who she was, a woman instrumental in the public education in Texas. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Isabel. Appreciate it. And hey, fantastic presentation, Clément. I need to buy your book. It looks fantastic. Thank
you very much.
No problem. I always lecture in my classes about World War II. And of course, it's really interesting coming from England, where I'm from, and we had the Blitz and everything.
I talk about it in the book. There are many letters about it.
Yeah. And of course, Churchill never let go. But I always like lecturing to my students about spam. So when the British and French troops and American troops, were getting ready for D-Day in the summer of 1944, of course, they were malnourished, and the Americans brought over this fake meat, spam, and it fed everyone up, and everyone was ready to go into battle. And personally, I like spam. Now, my wife doesn't really like spam, but then again, yeah. So talking about World War II, but then again, I can go off in tangents every now and then. But hey, thank you, Isabel. Really appreciate being here. My book is about Sally Brooke Capps.
So this is your book?
Yes.
Yes, this is the book.
It was, yeah. So of course, people have said, "Oh, that's a very creepy photo, isn't it?" Well, photographs back those days were, kind of creepy. But she was a beautiful woman. And I traveled. What I like to do whenever I research, I like to travel to the places where my subjects were, to you can say to feel the ghosts, you can say. And so I began this project in graduate school. And what I like about women's history is that it's a new kind of history where not many people have told these stories. You know, you go to Barnes and Noble and you see a lot of books about conflicts, about presidents and politics, not much about women, unfortunately. And women have contributed a lot to society, sometimes from behind the scenes like Sally Brooke Capps, or others at the front. However, their histories have been buried underneath all these, you can say, male topics. So I like to press a lot in my classes where, hey, you have this other half of the population who actually did a lot at home, within the communities, their organizations such as reading clubs and Shakespeare clubs, which promoted society and promoted advancement of culture. And Sally Brooke Capps
I would mention also, Joshua, that of course, you know, this week it's special because that brought me to mention that March is Women's History Month, a month where we learn about women, we recognize and celebrate the women who have changed the world, but also the women in our life yesterday and today. And Sally Brooke, we must say, she played an instrumental role in the growth of public education in Texas.
She did, yes. So she was part of a group that lobbied for the Texas government to pass this bill in 1901 that created Texas Women's University today. Back then, in 1903, when it opened, it was the College of Industrial Arts in Denton, North Texas, near to where I currently live in Commerce. And that institution was the first state-supported institution for females in the state at that time, and one of the first in the United States. At the end of the 19th century, schools were segregated by sex. And of course, they were segregated by race too, but they were segregated by sex. So the males went to the military academies to learn all their business and military sciences. And then the women were subjugated to the schools where they learnt the domestic arts, practical housekeeping, cooking, and everything that prepared them to be a good wife. At the same time, Sally Capps was educated at North Texas Female College in Sherman, which at that time was only a high school. The colleges were only high school back then. Of course, they didn't have the accreditation or the degrees. So she did not have a college education. Most women at that time in the United States, in Texas, did not have an education past their basic secondary high school education. And she was one of these people that said, hey, look, I want my kids. She had 3 kids. I want my kids and my grandkids and the rest of the Texas school children to have a really good education, into college, into graduate school, getting those professional degrees, regardless of what their sex was, male or female. And so she lobbied to start this institution. She was a regent on their board of regents for 18 years. And today, Texas Women's University is one of the most paramount women's universities in the world, not just the United States. And it was Sally Capps, one of those women who you can say has been buried under all the other history, where she actually created this reality where young schoolgirls can actually continue their education like they do today.
Yeah, she was an amazing woman, and I like to go back to a little bit on her background, you know, a family background, because Sally grew up in a comfortable and wealthy family. We should say that, you know, she She was well educated herself, and her father, Dr. John Brooke, came from England to settle in a small town of Sherman, near Dallas. So he hoped to start a new and prosperous life, which ended up to happen because he became a celebrity in his town. All right, how did he become a celebrity? His father, Sally's father, became a celebrity. How come?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. I'd say the most obvious reason was that there weren't many people in the town back then. So if you had the loudest mouth, which he did, then you could basically, run for all these political positions. He was the postmaster of Sherman. Of course, he opened the first drugstore in Sherman. He was a doctor. He was a dentist. Also, he basically, you can say he came from nothing and he worked his way to the top. And of course, when Sally was born at the tail end of the Civil War in 1864, she had a pretty comfortable lifestyle. And I always like to say this in my talks too, but I'm basically writing about a white, wealthy woman in these times. I recently gave a talk at Meredith College on Zoom in North Carolina. And I said, hey, look, when we talk about women's history, we need to include everyone. And yes, I'm very proud that I included Sally Capps in the women's history story. However, there were many, many other people of different colors and nationalities that Capps probably interacted with. However, she did not fight for them. She did not champion them. We talk about the 19th Amendment, passed in 1920, and it gave women in the United States the right to vote. Well, it only gave white women the right to vote. It wasn't until the 1960s with the Voting Rights Act when it gave women of different colors and nationalities the right to vote as well. Going back to your first point, Isabella, yes, Dr. John Brooke, he was a fascinating guy. I read his letters. It is very funny that he was a loudmouth, you can say, but at the same time, he didn't like to be around other people at first. When he settled in Sherman, he settled on the outskirts of Sherman, and he basically lived with the Native Americans out there. He didn't live with his Anglo population. But slowly he moved into town. He got married, of course. He had 3 children. One of them died when when they were young. But of course, Sally grew up. Also, I might point out that Sally, her father died when she was a teenager. So she never had a father figure. And that is why with her, you can say feminist ambitions when she grew older, she really wanted to find a husband, a spouse, a partner who would support her. Because at that time, these women, they were meant to be married, meant to upkeep the domestic household, raise their children, and not say a word in public, right? Well, Sally was not like that.
And she found the perfect husband.
Exactly, yeah. She found a perfect husband, William Capps, who was a prominent, wealthy attorney in Fort Worth. He was a developer of Fort Worth, the Metroplex as we know today. And he supported her like no other. And yes,
she could, her life turned to be a life of a devotion to public service because she didn't have to worry about, going to make money. And the husband was well-to-do enough to, so she could give her life to others and advocate public education. And how did she become a feminist advocacy?
Yeah, so what I classify Sally Capps is she was a liberal feminist. She straddled the line between pure feminism and then someone that was very recluse and only stuck to the household. When we think of pure feminism, we think of, let's say, Susan B. Anthony, the great suffragist in the progressive and Gilded Age, who did not marry. She was like, hey, look, marrying is a sin. If you are a woman and you marry, your husband will drag you down, and that's that, right? And then on the other side, you've got the females, the woman who basically kept to the household, and they did not say anything. They did not support their views. They stayed in line with their husband. Sally Capps was right in the middle. She straddled the line. And what she did was, when she moved to Fort Worth and she married her husband, she married all those, you can say, all those contacts. So she was in that position where she could make power. And this is why I explain in my classes where those women of color who weren't in those positions, they did not get the power at the time. It was only the white woman, like Sally Capps, when she married into that elitist society, that was where they had the power. They could convince their husbands, the politicians in the state governments, to pass laws that were specifically for white women. What Sally Capps did was, when she moved to Fort Worth, she joined these reading clubs. She organized. She created groups that were specifically designed to twist their husbands' heads, basically the other way, and say, hey, look, you need to put this agenda, you need to put this education bill in our agenda and move it forward. So that's what she did. She mobilized. She was part of that mobilization of white women in the late 19th century, early 20th century. And of course, it helped the white woman get the right to vote. And then later on down the line, when Sally gets older and all these other women leaders get older, then they start helping those of color. They start helping all women achieve the same education standards as their male counterparts.
And yes, and she was happily married. So we know now, with 3 children who will also become successful, and maybe except the last child. I don't know. The second girl studied the history and lifestyle of France. She became fluent in French. Both girls were very literate, and they had talent. They were talented writers.
Yes, she had 3 children.
They continue what Sally has started when after Sally fell sick and passed away. We see there is a continuation, and by the way, what legacy the Fort Worth Kindergarten Association left in the state of Texas?
Yes, so because Sally was so instrumental to, and her husband, of course, was so instrumental to the city, the Fort Worth actually, in the 1910s, just before her husband passed, her husband was very wealthy, and he gave a lot of land and a lot of money to the schools of Fort Worth. And to commemorate their family, the Fort Worth City Council named a park after Capps, the family name. So Capps Park is still in Fort Worth. It's a fantastic small little park surrounded by all these old houses. In addition, their family house is still there. The Queen Anne's house on Penn Street in Fort Worth, and I visited it, and it's now a law firm. So you have a bunch of attorneys in this old house, and they know some of the history, and it was very nice going to the house and seeing where she lived, where her family lived. Isabel, you were saying about her children. Yes, her children because of her dedication as a mother and as a leader in the community, her children received a quality education. And all three of them went to college, something that Sally did not have when she was a child. So she saw basically her legacy when she passed after World War II in 1946. And she continued fighting, even when she retired in 1929 from public life for those next, 17 years? I can't really do math, but 17 years. In her twilight years, she continued fighting for education rights for women and children across Texas. She was deeply involved in her church, in her local church, and she was not just a house mother, but in reality, she was a community leader. She was dedicated to the principles that her father and her mother had instilled in her. Hard work gets you a long way, regardless of who you are, regardless of where you've come from, regardless of your sex. Hard work basically brings results, and it did.
Now, the College of Industrial Arts in Denton, is it right to say that it's the first college for women in Texas?
Yes, it was the first college exclusively for women. They only allowed women there, young women. It did not become integrated until 1976. That's when Texas Women's University, the namesake now, allowed male students, but still a majority of the population are women students.
Now, the College of Industrial Arts, is it related to the university you are taught, you teach?
No, it's not. So the university that I currently teach and work at, A&M Commerce, is a branch of the A&M school. So Texas A&M in College Station, the big one. And that was a all-boys military school. Fortunately, this school, it was founded as a progressive school before A&M bought it out. But this school was very progressive. There were some schools in Texas in the late 19th century that were male and female students combined. But the College of Industrial Arts, which Sally lobbied and worked at, it was exclusively for women.
Does it still exist?
And it still exists. It's Texas Women's University in Denton. And it's a fantastic campus. The campus is beautiful. They got a fantastic faculty and staff that work there. And like I said before, it's one of the biggest women universities in the United States and the world. Last year, they awarded more PhDs, more doctorate degrees to women than any other university in the United States. What
does they specialize to?
It specializes in all subjects now. So when the university opened,
mostly liberal arts.
Yes, liberal arts, the sciences. When the university opened with Sally, of course, exclusively for women, the state was like, okay, we will fund you, the institution. However, you're only going to focus on domestic arts, practical housekeeping, cooking, and everything that was in the domestic household. Now, there's so many degrees there because, to be honest, a majority of women don't want to be in the house anymore. They want to work. They want to get out. They want to make money. They want to do the same jobs as males do, and they rightly so deserve that opportunity. So, there was a period in, say, the 1940s, around the same time as Clément is writing about, where many institutions that were exclusively for females or exclusively for males were like, hey, this is not right. Let's combine the curriculums and ensure that everyone gets equal opportunity.
And Sally Brooke was this kind of woman that was as good as a housewife as good as also working outside the house. She could combine both, and this takes a lot of energy as well. But she has 3 children. She was taking care of her house. She could also work. And of course, she has a husband that was able to support financially her project of advocating the public education in Texas. Now, in 1920, the 19th Amendment was adopted. Texas was the first southern state to adopt the law. Can you tell us maybe the last word about
So yeah, the 19th Amendment, it was a stepping stone. It was a fantastic movement. So the year before, the suffragists in Texas actually persuaded the Governor William Hobby, to let them vote in the primaries. So not the general election, however, the primary and the political conventions then. And of course, in 1920, and of course, after Woodrow Wilson, the president, signed the law, it was a fantastic stepping stone. However, like I always tell my students and people in the audience, we should not really celebrate the 19th Amendment as such. We should commemorate it. We should remember it as a stepping stone. And yes, it was a fantastic stepping stone in American history. However, it did leave out a major part of the population, such as the women of color, those who descended from Native Americans, the Hispanics, Asian American women did not get that vote in 1920. They got that vote 40 years later in the Voting Rights Act of 1964 and 1965. So yeah, the 19th Amendment, that was a fantastic piece of legislation that Sally helped pass with all these other Texas suffragists. However, they left out a majority of their fellow women. But yes, the 19th Amendment, that was a huge stepping stone. It is similar to when Barack Obama was inaugurated in 2009 as the first Black president of the United States. It's a huge stepping stone. Now, we're not fully there. However, basically the results showed.
Well, thank you so much for this valuable information. I think there is some comments in our chat box. If you want to look.
Someone.
To you, of course, Joshua. And I think I saw 1 or 2 questions.
Yeah, someone asked me, why am I interested in women? Usually it's women writing about other women. That's a very good question. First of all, Sally Brooke Capps, no one has written about her. I'm the first one to write about her. So her archives, her letters, her diaries, her personal memoirs were located in the library where I did my graduate degree in American history. So I decided, hell, I will go and write about Sally Brooke Capps, and she's a fascinating person. That's one reason. Second reason is that women make up a majority of our population, more than half of our population. And there are so many stories out there that, like I've said before, have been buried under all the masculine topics that we think of today, such as wars and presidents and politics and such. And the woman played a large role behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. However, they've been lost in public memory. So my duty, my role as an historian, as a woman's historian, is to shed some light on these interesting characters. And they were instrumental, not really instrumental in world politics or world history. However, they were community leaders. They were instrumental to the people in their communities. So of course, if their communities are small, they're not really going to be well remembered in the history books. So it is my duty to shed some light on these forgotten characters. And the articles that I've written for French Caller magazine, I've shed some light on these forgotten French pioneers who were very important in French and American history. However, I'm not really mentioned in the history books. So I want to give them a shot. I want to give them a chance, a voice, you can say, in the modern day history books.
Thank you so much for this valuable information, Joshua. We are going to, unfortunately, it's time to end this virtual author talks. But it was a pleasure for me to have all of you joining us. Thank you again for our special guest speaker, Consul Warren, Clément Horvath, and Professor Joshua Chanin, as well as our attendees. I think there is one more chat. I want to make sure, yeah, everybody is thank you again, our author today. This is the end of our virtual author talks, and you did a great speech, Joshua. Thank you. We hope that you enjoy learning more about Las Vegas history, the mysterious story of Jonathan's The Final Portrait, about the very moving collection of letters from soldiers from Clément who share with us, and the fascinating life of a woman, Sally Brooke Capps. Here, a picture, and there is more pictures inside the book, actually. And how we can all become inspired by ideas, by books, and the amazing written pieces of those three authors today. Thank you for your questions, and have a wonderful rest of the day for those who are in the West Coast of the US, and all of the viewers who are ready to maybe turn off the lights. See you later from Las Vegas. Thank you. Bye-bye.